You do not want to drive yourself into a position of deprivation, or you will have no power or efficacy in the greater community. You will have to agree to whatever terms are offered you to provide you with the very things you need to live, the very things that you have exhausted here in the world. Here your environmentalism is not simply based upon aesthetics or spirituality. It is based upon the vital necessities of life. Free nations in the universe value the individual and take advantage of the individual's talents and natural inclinations. That is the great difference between a free nation and a nation that is not free. In all cases, however, in higher social orders, dissension, conflict and an individual's destructive tendencies are limited and, in many cases, greatly suppressed. The great difference is the valuing of the individual's innate capabilities and supporting the individual to participate in society based upon the contribution of those innate abilities. In a nation that is not free, you are simply assigned a role based upon your social standing, the standing of your family, the standing of your parents, the standing of what your society requires from you. This has nothing to do with your individual talents and abilities. The only exception made here, in a nation that is not free, is if you have or demonstrate clairvoyance, in which case you may be prepared to function in the diplomatic corps, which is an entirely different education. Nonetheless, you are not free to choose or determine your destiny in a nation that is not free. It is determined for you entirely. And the determination is based upon your social standing, not upon your individual talents or inclinations. In the future, should humanity navigate the great waves of change, you will be living in a much more structured world. You will be living in a world that will have undergone tremendous travail and deprivation. Nations will have to unite with each other to maintain the well-being of humanity. This will be a very different world from the world you experience today. You will have very little social power. You will have very little wealth. You will have very little freedom of movement, either because it is denied you or simply because you do not have the resources to enjoy it or to utilize it. Life will be far less free than what you may experience today in an affluent society. In many parts of the world, you would be assigned to work wherever you are needed, without regard to your own talents and inclinations, unless you had a special set of skills. People will have very little wealth, except for a very few. There will be very little consumption compared to what you experience today in your wealthy nations. You will be living with a memory of the past, of better times, remembering times of greater affluence and greater freedom, greater enjoyment, times that were not overshadowed by the great problems of the world in the degree to which they will occur in the future. You cannot escape this future, just like you cannot escape the reality of the greater community. You are following a pathway that most nations have followed, gaining technological abilities, their growing populations outstripping their world's natural resources, being forced into deprivation, into greater control, and being required to unite or to fail altogether. You will look back upon this past century, and particularly the latter parts of the 20th century, with great longing. This will be true for so many people. You have squandered the wealth of this world. You did not preserve it, you did not sustain it, and now you must deal with the consequences. Part of the consequence is the tremendous loss of freedom. You do not see this yet because you do not have the wisdom to see it. It has not been demonstrated. There are people who will say, well, anything would be better in the universe than what we have here, but these people do not recognize what a completely foolish statement this is. To live in the world that is not free would be unimaginably difficult for you. And depending on the severity of this, your life would be controlled. Should you show any aberrancy, you would either be imprisoned or destroyed. You would have no right to protest. You may have very little opportunity to improve your circumstances, or even to make a recommendation to improve the circumstances of everyone. You would have no personal choices. You would be assigned a role. You would be assigned work. You might even be assigned a partner. It may be prohibited for you to generate offspring if your genetic qualities were not valued. To have a child, you would have to gain a license from the state. You would have to have an approved partner. Your children would be taken from you at a very early age and educated according to the needs of the state. Such things are very common amongst technologically advanced races. You can begin to see here what an awful prospect this really is. Yet this is common amongst large technological societies. Even in free societies, individual aberrancy and destructiveness are extremely limited. You cannot be reckless and chaotic if that threatens the welfare and the stability of your nation. You can begin to see here that the requirements of living in the greater community, even if you could evolve and sustain yourself as a free race, would be very different from what you experience today. There would be greater social welfare, but you would not see the personal wealth that you see today. You would not have the personal freedom that you might enjoy today. There would be sufficient food and medical provisions, but most individuals would not have much personal wealth. Your freedom of choice would be really limited. If you had a unique talent that was recognized, you might be offered a very limited possibility of employment. This is true even in the freer nations of the universe. You can see here that life in the universe is not based on human values and that the emphasis on necessity is tremendous. Even in a society that has high values and ethics, necessity requires a certain amount of conformity to the needs of everyone. Free nations must be united to survive, to offset foreign influence, to maintain stability and to maintain their security. How unlike this is from the world you see today, where nations are competing with one another, where there is immense suffering and poverty, where there are very small groups of wealthy people who indulge themselves endlessly in their own pleasures and obsessions. This would be very rare in an advanced nation in the universe. You may have a ruling elite, and they may have privileges and wealth that no one else has, but in a free society, the discrepancy would not be as great as what you see today, nor would the abuse of this wealth be as great as what you see today. So you must adjust your expectations, for humanity is moving into a position where it will have to choose between individual freedom and stability and security. They will tend to offset one another, and you will not have the wealth to indulge yourself to the degree to which you have. This is the world you have created. This is the path of evolution you have chosen, and you will have to adapt to the consequences. The adaptation would be very difficult, but it could be beneficial to you, for it will prepare you for the realities of life in the greater community, where a world such as yours, stewarded by a weak and divided race, however talented, would not survive for long in the presence of greater forces. Indeed, humanity has reached a point where greater forces will begin to exert themselves here. Previously, for foreign races to gain biological resources from the world without creating establishments here has been very difficult to do, given the biological diversity of this world and the fact that most advanced races live in either completely or relatively sterile environments. As a result, humanity has been allowed to evolve with very little interference. But interference now is beginning and will be continuous from here on out. It is a very difficult transition you are beginning to undergo, one that most races will have to face. This transition will require human unity and cooperation. It will not tolerate unwanted dissension to a very great degree. It will limit human wealth and freedom. And it will place you under increasing pressure and influence from the greater community itself. You can begin to see here that there is nowhere for you to be reckless, there is nowhere for you to run and hide, there is nowhere for you to live in fantasy with dreams of personal acquisition. You are not going to go out and plunder the greater community. The greater community is not full of ignorant, isolated, primitive tribes of beings. To the contrary, it is a mature environment, an environment that has gained great stability, an environment that has required great restraint, a competitive environment, an environment of influence, an environment of discernment, an environment that humanity will have to contend with increasingly from this time forward. When we begin to speak about the spirituality of life in the universe, we will speak of freedom in a more complete sense, the power and presence of knowledge within you, the greater intelligence that God has placed within you to guide you, to protect you and to lead you to great accomplishments. This is a different kind of freedom than social freedom and can exist in environments where social freedom has been greatly limited. It is this greater freedom now that you must embrace and cultivate, for it will give you advantage and precedence in a world in decline. And, as you will see, this greater freedom will be immensely important for humanity in determining what kind of future it will have within a greater community of intelligent life. Do not worship the form of religion. Seek its essence, its power and its intelligence. This is the hit point of religion in the universe.